Indika Pereira from Coke, Coca-Cola beverages supply chain, head of supply chain. Thank you so much. The Channa, a very well-known supply side technologist, and Rohan Palewata. Rohan is the founder and chairman of Lanka Harness. He is manufacturing sensors which are used by most of the leading auto manufacturers in the country. And the session chair today is Imal Fonseca from CVL. Imal, you have time till 11:15. Thank you so much. Over to you, Imal.
Thank you, Lakshman. As I came here this morning, I set myself, I was trying to figure out what do I want to learn from this session, particularly from Dylan and the rest of the panelists. And I just noted something down. I said, how do we disrupt value creation in execution, leveraging digital technology? And to answer that question, I would like to invite someone who, in my mind, is one of the most brilliant brand strategists I know of, and also someone who I consider an operations guru. That indeed is a unique combination of skills that very few of us have. So to do so, Dylan, can I please welcome my good friend, Dylan Gunaratna.
Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you, Imal. I think the compliment was a little bit too generous. I sat next to Imal for a couple of years, and he certainly was brilliant in brand strategy. Even then, I only did execution. However, a lot of interesting remarks which were made in the morning. Lakshman, thank you for inviting me. I think, Peter, you spoke of constipation. If local industry is constipated, I can tell you, I'm sorry, we are having loose motions. Because our industry and our business is driven by speed. And frankly, we have too much of it. And we've spent most of our lives gaining frequent gray hairs trying to cope with the speed that we have to do it. So a lot of the sexy stuff has been said. I'm here to talk about execution. And when you say execution, it sounds like you're trying to kill somebody. So hopefully this presentation will be a little bit more interesting than that. So I come from the business of fashion. We supply lingerie to Victoria's Secret and a couple of other brands. Sounds sexy, but take my word for it, it's a lot of detail and a lot of operations. So let me try and make this a little more interesting. So what's the business of execution? Imal is a brand strategist, as I said, and his business, so his forte is in creating perceived value. A friend of mine who works for Boeing once summarized marketing in 3 words. And it was a tough deal. What he said was, the whole of marketing is managing perceived value. So whether you're building brands, whether you're building products, whether you're doing innovation, whether you're delivering this value, you're managing perceived value. Now, I'm here as a businessman. Most of you are here as business people, and we have another job, and that is making profit. So I want to kind of talk to you about how do we make profit. If managing perceived value is marketing, then the cost of execution and the difference between this chasm is profit. If managing perceived value is marketing, execution is cost, then profit is in the middle. So how, in this new world, do we make more profit? This is the question. This is the question for people like us who operate in value chains, who serve global brands, brands that are evolving very fast, and chasing the smack stack in consumer behavior. How do we support them? How do we create profit for them and for ourselves across the value chain and adopt these new technologies in creating greater profit? This, I believe, is the challenge for me to address. So moving on, Peter proposed that digital is everything. I agree, but I think, like Jonathan said, most of us are in transition. So we can't tomorrow leave our legacy business models to task and leave 67,000 people or 50,000 people to hang as we convert into this new digital business model. Not only is that the case, but consumers are also in a stage of transformation. So we spoke of omnichannels. So consumers also need touch and feel and to experience the product physically to an extent. So as certainly the business models go digital, as certainly there are pure digital models which create 80% of their value through digital areas, there is still a lot of physical businesses in terms of hard goods. You still need to produce a car so that you can get from A to B. You still need Jonathan to provide banking as service models. So there is a lot of value still created in service and hard goods and FMCG and a lot of areas. And I'm here to talk to you about businesses where the process of value creation is still biased to the hard decisions, to materials, to supply chains, to the movement of these supply chains, and to talk about how can we do these activities more efficiently in the era of the smack stack. So that's where I intend to focus on. Now this has been killed, right? Kodak's been killed today, right? Everybody's poster child for how not to run business, you know, and rightly so. The reason why everybody is talking about Kodak is because of the sheer industry dominance they had in photography a couple of years ago. Kodak not only created film rolls, Kodak not only created cameras, they extended their dominance across the value chain. They were in chemicals, they were in film manufacture, they were owning every ounce of IP along the value chain, and they captured profit at every stage. So this is a giant. Now this giant's been slayed. How did they get slayed? From a place nobody saw it coming. It got slayed from digital cameras with camera phones. They got slayed by Instagram. They got slayed by Facebook, which is now capturing all these images and sharing them instead of us showing albums to people like we used to show. We used to show our wedding albums. We used to show our Christmas photographs. Nobody shows that anymore. You've got digital photo frames. We've got Facebook, and we've got Instagram. So this business model's been killed. So my challenge again is, I've just put some facts on the screen. You're obviously going to see how many pictures were taken a year. How did we capture value? How many film rolls were shown? What is the cost of a film roll? These were the indicators of the previous value chain. Today, the same amount of pictures, are much more than billions of these pictures are being taken, and none of these parts of the value chain are being used. So the conversation now is to talk about how the supply chain as we see it is likely to get disrupted. So to bring us all down to one playing field, I thought I'll simply take some definitions. So I took the definition of manufacturing, I took the definition of supply chain, and I took the definition of lean. Why do I introduce manufacturing and supply chain both together? I think Gayani nicely introduced to you the fact that we actually don't compete as a factory. We compete as supply chains. So when a consumer decides to have a need and have that need satisfied, he or she doesn't want to know where this is made. He or she she wants to consume it. And we, all of us, from the point of design, from the point of creation of material, to the assembly, to the delivery logistics, to the store, compete as one entity to satisfy this need. If any of these links fail, that means there is a failure of execution of the promise. Your perceived value in me, your perceived value in the brand has now been failed by one link in the supply chain. So when I talk about fulfilling a promise, which is the point of execution, I'm talking about not only the process of manufacturing, which we need to talk about productivity, but the process of the total supply chain as one value chain fulfilling this promise. Why do I bring lean into this conversation? The reason I bring lean into this conversation is starting from Frederick Taylor to Ford. We started from division of labor to the assembly line to automation. And then we brought Toyota, which was actually a company that was almost destroyed in the Second World War, actually was struggling to cope with their small market. They were not able to do large scale manufacturing. And they were also coping with a lot of product diversity. So they went to the US to actually study Ford. But Ford had large-scale manufacturing, long assembly lines, and Toyota found it difficult to actually replicate this. So lean was a paradigm shift in manufacturing, which actually spoke about how do I bring productivity and efficiency and responsiveness to the value chain while serving the customer's varied needs. So where did they get the insight? They got the second most important insight from a supermarket chain, which actually was replacing every item in the supermarket. Every time somebody took a Coke can, there would be one more Coke can which would fall into that aisle. So Toyota saw this and said, hey, this is interesting. They are replenishing only at the rate of sale. So the customer's choice is being replenished with costs in the value chain, in the supply chain at the rate of consumption. This is interesting because this is efficient. This means that if I only go do things at this rate, I'm not only going to manage my resources, I'm going to manage my inventory, I'm going to manage my capital goods, I'm going to manage my working capital, I'm going to manage how much of overheads that I'm going to manage my throughput. So these were the two fundamentals that sparked off this lean journey. And I just wanted to baseline you, but this is the short story. So my friends in lean manufacturing would call this heresy because they're so devoted to lean manufacturing that they believe this is a lifelong journey, and to present lean manufacturing in one slide is at the cost of being executed almost. But to make this world a little simpler, I present to you two things in manufacturing. One are outcomes. So what do you want to do in manufacturing and execution? The primary purpose is to minimize the waste. So I have to deliver your value proposition. I want to deliver your value proposition with the minimum amount of wasted activity, material, logistics, and every other aspect that goes into it, so that I can minimize my cost of execution. So there are 7 wastes, and I'm doing this very quickly, that are seen in the world of manufacturing. And this is like, again, manufacturing 101, which creates costs to the business or which creates waste. Number 1 is overproduction. Go back to the supermarket. What we said is we don't want to produce 1 can more than what the consumer is buying at the rate of consumption. So overproduction is the first waste. Second waste is inventory. Why do I keep inventory? Inventory is what goes obsolete when product life cycles become shorter. So the second waste is inventory. The third waste is overprocessing, and all of us are guilty of this. We are the heroes. We go and implement system after system after system in the search of accuracy and the prevention of failure. But 90% of these systems and processes do not add any value to the consumption of the value proposition that I deliver, right? And we forget it. These processes continue to run, continue to burn overhead, and continue to burn capital in the way of system supporting. So these are a few things. I'll move on very quickly. The others are motion, transport. If you're transporting things too far, these create waste, right? And so on and so forth. From these outcomes, I will move into 4 processes that generally then try to balance these outcomes or minimize these outcomes in the delivery of value propositions. And I'll start with the 2 extremes. One principle is long-termism. In manufacturing, ladies and gentlemen, we hate change. Our first response to you, if you ask, can I do that, is no. Why? The moment I embrace change, that means my productivity is going to be lost, right? And somebody's going to be out of a job. Some machine is going to get redundant. So when you ask me, can you do this to a consumer, my first response used to be no. Now, as a person like Imal said, who came from marketing, I have banned the no word. We'll think about it, is the new answer. But no is not allowed. So in manufacturing, we want to take a long-term point of view. We want to take a long-term point of view because if you change product every day, like Jonathan said, but don't have an understanding of why you're differentiating product or what incremental value you're capturing, you're likely to waste far more capital and resources in the generation of this product than is likely to be captured in the selling of this product. So one view is having a long-term strategic proposition and being very clear that this is where I need to invest my overhead and my capital and my manpower and my talent. The second view, right at the bottom of the pyramid, is problem solving and standardization and minimizing variation. So we say no because we like to make the same widget every day, because then my quality doesn't change, then my machine doesn't change, then my skills don't change, and I come to work every day and I have a standardized process. We hate variation because variation creates motion, variation creates defects, variation creates overconsumption of material. So the world is between these 2 extremes. One is having a long-term view. The other is a question of solving problems every day, creating standardization every day, and making sure those problems never keep coming back through continuous improvement. So these are the 2 extremes that people in execution would love to have. Now in the middle are 2 things. One, we go back to responsiveness. Because my friend Imal needs to sell another can of Coke, he wants to make it Diet Coke, I now have no choice, because otherwise he loses market share. So to make my organization responsive, I have to come up with tools. Number 1 is that I do not produce more than the market consumes. So think principles like tuck time come, where we talk about the rate of consumption and the rate of make. We must keep these 2 things in balance. So balancing and rate of consumption are important in the world of execution. Now you're getting already bored and you must be wondering why I'm taking so long to explain this. The reason I'm explaining all of this is so that I can disrupt them with you later on. And the second piece, which is the third element in my pyramid over here, which you're struggling to read, is organizing. And in organizing, we want to linear organize the processes, the activities, the manpower, the distance, and make sure that everything is organized in a way that we waste minimum resources in getting to the outcome. So I believe that's manufacturing one-on-one in one slide. I hope I got a nod, so I'm moving on. The second conversation is about supply chains. So manufacturing is one bucket now, and now I have multiple buckets, multiple people who are organized together as in this overall supply chain that is focused on delivering the value chain that all of you have now been promised by our organizations. Now, what is important in supply network design? When we are first having one factory and one customer, life is great because there is, here I'm producing and here I'm consuming. I can draw a straight line and it's efficient. Now, the problem is I start going into more than one market. And when I start going into more than one market, this distance makes it inefficient. So now I have to start producing in more than one location. When I start producing in more than one location, I start making my product in different factories in different processes. Now I have to ship product 1 to factory, customer 2 and ship product 3. So this network gets more and more complicated. So as I organize my world, I need to reduce complexity in some way so that I improve my cost and productivity. So this is an important science. And as organizations grow, frankly, they forget how to organize because they're growing organically. They're growing by adding factories, they're adding by country, they're adding by new product life, they're adding new outlets, and they allow the complexity to go on. And inside this complexity lies a lot of waste of redundant product, and a lot of transported resources that are getting redundant. So I don't want to take you through a supply network design program, but the bottom line is few things are important in designing a supply chain. One is being true to your value proposition or how you differentiate your business. The value proposition for Victoria's Secret and the value proposition for Walmart are two different things. One is driving complete economics, unit cost. The other one is driving fast fashion, relevant, technology driven. So there, everybody wants to make the cost as low as possible, but as long as they keep their value proposition whole. So how they design their supply chain will be different. Three things are important when you think about it. Once you deliver your value proposition, second is cost. Third is response. Fourth is risk. So life is a balance of these three things. Do you want, probably going to, shall I say, right now, maybe going to Turkey, or well, Turkey is not too risky right now, but going to Syria might be the lowest cost opportunity, but do we want to take that risk? These are the questions that as in design of supply chains that we will have to take. How stable are the exchange rates? What is the geopolitical relationship with these countries? What is the economic cost of the risks and the responsiveness and the cost that I'm willing to take in delivering my value proposition is the supply network design challenge that is ahead of us. So now I've baselined ourselves to, this is broadly the world of execution. Moving on, so if I summarize this world, I'm sorry, even with my spectacles, I'm struggling to see, so I must need something. So the world is changing in three buckets. Number one, with all of the conversations that have been had right now, and we have heard that yesterday's business models are becoming redundant very fast. With business models being redundant, what we're saying is those value propositions, those product life cycles are becoming short. And this short product life cycle is making huge issues for us, gentlemen and ladies in the supply chain, because we are the guys who have to respond. You're chasing the next new iPhone, and when you want to buy that, I'm still making the previous one. And it takes time for me to organize my supply chain. It takes time for me to organize the suppliers, select the right materials, put all of this together, reduce the risk and get it into your hands. So with these product life cycles shortening, traditional supply chains are struggling to deliver. The second point that needs to be talking about is the fact that demand volatility is creating massive capacity redundancy. The fact that the demand is fractionalizing so quickly essentially means that all the capacities, and as Lakshman nicely put in his brief, those monolithic large factories with people sitting there are becoming redundant faster than we can make new ones with new technology. What happens to all of these capital that we have invested? What happens to the people that we have trained? They're becoming redundant faster than I can cope with what you're asking for. So that's the second conversation. So The third conversation then is, what is the half-life of an organization? Half-life of an organization, if you track the Fortune 500 and look at how many companies are continuing to live in the Fortune 500, you will find that the half-life of organizations are going down every day. So right now, if I'm not mistaken, and again, I stand to be corrected because I've got only a vague number in my head, I believe a half-life of a Fortune 500 organization is something like between 6 and 11 years. This is a Fortune 500 company. So this is how fast companies are going out of business because of this. So the third point, ladies and gentlemen, is sustainability. Sustainability of ventures that we are creating, sustainability of the talent and the skills that we are creating, sustainability of communities that are dependent on this execution networks that we have created is under threat because markets are changing very, very fast. So that sets me up to tell you a little bit about what I think is likely to happen. And all of these conversations have already been had by the other wonderful panelists, and so I'm probably going to be repeating a few things. My belief in the manufacturing execution world, the first trend is going to come from co-creation. In the past, most of us were used to design-led, or brands and manufacturers leading design. So Udena said, a shirt is the same shirt that I used to buy, or my grandfather used to buy, which is true. I think we've got the same cuffs, we've got the same collar. The reality is, you know, some of us are wearing Van Heusen, some of us are wearing something else, and they've convinced us that this is the best shirt to be wearing tomorrow. So we're paying a little extra and buying that. But tomorrow, this is becoming harder to do. So in the past, brands and manufacturers would invest in a long value chain which had, you know, so-called highly paid experts sensing market, creating new designs, spending time developing these designs, and then transferring these to manufacture. So long processes of execution, converting design to manufacturing, consuming large amounts of overhead and capital, and then we go to the market and say, this is the best product out there. And you believed us, right? You believed the brand and you bought this and you paid 200% more for it. But tomorrow, this is, as again, I think Chris showed, this is becoming less and less relevant. We are seeing peer-to-peer networks. Now it's important for me what Imal thinks. It is important for me what Irfan thinks and Lakshman thinks. So right now, I actually listen to my Facebook network and not really what this guy is telling me that this is the best thing I want to have, but I want him to see me in this picture and tell me whether he actually thinks it's a good thing for me because I trust him more than that. So what does this do? This is fragmenting demand. This is fractionalizing demand. This is creating far more differentiation than I can cope with execution, right? So the new world is about co-creation. If you look at Nike ID, if you look at Audi, everybody is now allowing the consumer to participate in the decision of how to build the product. We can no longer have all of these 500 people in the middle designing and deciding what I'm going to wear because I can't pay their overhead simply because the consumer is deciding more of it. So if I tell you a demand bucket, here the opportunity is the biggest loss of an organization is market share left on the table. In the past, I would be able to make a black, white, and brown product, and people would buy 70% of it. Today, we make a black, white, and brown, and it makes 30% of the product, and the rest of the 30 colors make another 25% of the product. And we now got another 20% market share. But tomorrow, and from now onwards, what's happening is they want the teal blue. They want the, dusty orange. And demand is fractionalizing. The question is, I can't get back into the market fast enough. So we need to create systems and processes and business models and execution frameworks where we bring the consumer closer to manufacturing, where we allow them to participate in our processes of creating and supply them without having large processes pre-manufacturing doing this. So I took a simple example. I didn't take any of the big guys. This is a company that I met in San Francisco. It's called Beta Brand. Beta Brand crowdsources design, crowd funds these designs, and creates them through crowdsourced factories. What do they do? One of the examples that you will see is the executive hoodie, right? So what designers do is they go and create design and put it onto Beta Brands and say, do you like what I just created? And let's say 100 consumers say, I think that's a great idea, I'm willing to buy that. Beta Brands looks at, okay, 10 designs that are doing really well, and then says, I'm going to fund that. So now because all of you said you like it, would you be willing to fund it? And then they make a little bit of it. They make a little bit of it and put it into their store, and it's a rave. And when it's a rave, they fund it again. So here comes participation, here comes co-design, and they're making the office yoga pant. What is an office yoga pant? Has anybody worn one? But it's something coming tomorrow, right? So ladies want to wear yoga pants to office now. So this is the type of co-creation that is happening, and we need to reorganize manufacturing and design development processes to be able to cope with this so that we do not lose the opportunity of market share, which is in the inches. I think most of you would have seen the movie, I forget the name, where Al Pacino says, it's all in the inches. And it's all in the inches in manufacturing in the future because that's the fight for market share. Moving on to the next slide. So we told you now how to fill the demand bucket. The second biggest cost in my world is not demand and market share, but is the loss of capacity. So in a manufacturing value chain, we invest in machines, we invest in people, we invest in a possible optimal capacity. So if I run at 100% run rate, how many units can I create? That determines my lowest cost per unit. Now, if I run at 50%, I think anybody can do the math, what it does to my cost per unit. It basically doubles it. So what happens in a world when demand is fractionalizing, my run lengths are declining, my supply chains can't respond anymore, is that you get a wave of amplitude. And that amplitude is, when I can give 100, they want 200. When I want another 100, they say I don't want anything. And what this does to me is that I'm spending more money creating the first 200 and losing money in creating nothing. So my unit costs are spiraling. This is the future of demand fulfillment. So what are the answers? Answers lie in analytics. The answers lie in some of the things that I told you earlier that we love in manufacturing, and that is to standardize. That is to allow modularity of design, but standardize the process. Standardize the approach to building something, so the simplest example is Lego. Your children love Lego. They build 100,000 things with the same things. So that is the dream in manufacturing. We want you to design, we want you to innovate, and we want you to get new forms of value, but we want to make it the same way. So Toyota is a great company that does this very quickly. I know I'm taking maybe too much time, but Toyota is a great company that does this, where they essentially have standardized. You don't get a car that has 5 nuts to tighten a wheel. They're standardized that it'll always be 4. If you take the number of differentials that are available, number of engines that are available, number of anything that is available, it has been standardized. But you get 2,000 models of new vehicles coming out, and you're paying more for it. You get the same output, but different combinations. So moving on, so first is standardization, and can analytics allow me to standardize my processes, standardize my methods, standardize my machines, standardize my operations, but allow you to build differently. And this is the first way. The second conversation is, I believe it was Rohan who spoke about the fact that we had central data warehouses in the past, and we allowed, we didn't call it the cloud, but people accessed it in the future, in the past as well. So when we have all of these factories around the world, we like to nominate them and say, you make product A, you make product B, you make product C, you serve market A, you serve market B, you serve market C, right? And what this does to me is it locks me in, because I'm building skills, I'm building infrastructure, and I'm building distance from market that locks me into a particular response time. So I'm building all of these things to service particular markets and products, and I'm now locked in. So what does the manufacturing supply chain guy want to do? He says, you want that product? You want 100 pieces? I can give you only 50 because it takes me half the time to bring my materials, half the time to set up my lines, half the time to train my people and get the unit costs out. Now, imagine a world that I've standardized. Imagine a world where all of the product specifications, the bill of materials, the methods, the machinery across the world is in one location, right? And all of fractional demand comes to this one location. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell all my factories not to make 100 units of one in one location. I'm going to tell my suppliers, you ship this amount of material to these locations because these locations have the right machinery, these locations have the right skill, these locations are able to respond optimized across the world into these markets faster. So I'm using my capacity. So I will make less, run small lengths, but I can even go to the extent of sending the machine settings that I need to do across the world from one location. So I am raising my response time, empowering people, literally telling people when they come to work tomorrow, what they should be doing, what skills they should be doing. I can even go to the extent of managing those skills. So the last I spoke to you about line balancing and leveling. So throughput is a big conversation because if one machine is running at 100% and the other machine is running at 50%, that means this depreciation is out of the window, right? And I'm not utilizing that. So, a lot of speakers spoke about Internet of Things. We believe there is a future where machine-to-machine communication can level the velocity of machine-to-machine, which means my consumption of material, my production of output will all be configured to the rate of demand. And people should be able to balance this so that my total risk in the market is minimized. Lastly, my last slide. So I spoke about demand. How do I fill the bucket of market share? I spoke about supply. How do I fill the bucket of capacity and optimize unit cost? My last is something that I didn't tell you. We speak about 7 wastes. The 8th waste is human potential. And all of us in manufacturing and supply chain tend to replace man with machinery very easily and think that when the cost curve works the other way, let's just take the person away and put a machine there. But human beings are the most malleable, most talented, most sustainable resource in the manufacturing or in any business model. They are the most adaptable. So if you look at them, how do I optimize human power? And that comes from bring your own device type of thinking. A lot of people spoke about security. Today, we bring people and we tell them to move one widget from A to B. But imagine a world that we are able to manage the skill development of the employee through the device. We are able to tell people what to come and work tomorrow. We are able to tell them the best employee in the world at what run rate they run. We're able to manage their succession planning. We're able to manage their variable incentives. We could give them a device that costs $100, frankly, and be able to manage their entire life cycle. They would be able to compete with an employee in Bangladesh or Indonesia and say that, look, this is the best method for this operation. This is the best target that has been achieved. These are the highest 3 defects. And this is what I should learn tomorrow if I'm going to go up the succession ladder. So a lot of people spoke about 9,000 visions. I think the time is coming when those 9,000 visions can be activated in manufacturing and supply chain as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dylan. That was precisely on time, I suppose, just like the supply chain you manage. Well done. Guys, just a quick message to all of you. You can send your questions to the panelists on 072-771-1585. And now we'll take a quick break for a commercial.
Platinum sponsor. For unlimited happiness, Mobitel, we care, always. Gold sponsor. On what's important to you, AIA Insurance, the real life company.
One experience on every device for everything in your life.
Agency partner, Media Factory Group of Company. Silver sponsor.
Simple to purchase and simple to implement. Make real savings and simplify your business with Intuition.
BoardPack, the leader in iPad board meeting automation.
Print media partner.
Vijay Newspapers, helping shape opinions.
Print partner.
Thank you. Just a small correction. The response number is not 71-294-7693. I'll repeat, 294-7693. All right, getting through. I mean, this is a quick fire round just before lunch, so it's going to be like a T20. Quick fire questions and short, crisp answers, and interrupting each other as we go on. All right, the first question, Indika, is to you. I mean, Dylan spoke of agility, adaptability, and sustainability, fundamentally from a B2B perspective. What's your perspective in a B2C environment with Coca-Cola globally and in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, first I have to correct your question because Imal, we are not in B2B, we are in B2B as well as B2C. Therefore, I think we know the customer response very well. The other thing, as Dylan mentioned, the world is moving very fast. People connect with each other never before. Technology is evolving. The consumer purchasing behavior is unpredictable. In the Dylan's presentation, he mentioned two ways. One is the inventory, other one is the overproduction. How we tackle this? Because if you are having a proper communication, if you can get the point of sales information, as you all know, if the product is out of stock, you are getting more orders. Then you are starting building stocks. But this is not the real sales. Therefore, you need to have a proper information. You can track it through mobile. Even the sales team can get the real order. Traditionally, what we do is you are looking at the warehouse available stocks and ordering. But you have to think about whether this is really consumer wants. Therefore, you have to get the consumer feel. Then only you can manage your inventories and the overproduction.
So thank you. So basically aligning demand, supply to demand creation.
Yeah.
This, Peter started talking of scam. The last time I started dwelling on scam, I got sued for $100 million, not by one party, but by two parties. So I'm not going to talk of scam. Then Dylan started talking of smack. And the only smack I know is a beverage. And now some people are talking of ice smack. Can you, Ramesh, can you talk a little bit about ice smack and what the hell is this?
Right. I think ice smack is primarily, I put a twist on to Lakshman's definition of smack is Internet of Things, because you cannot talk about big data in the absence of Internet of Things, and I'll just put some context to it. By 2020, we're talking about an 8 billion population and 70 billion devices being on the internet, which is going to generate data. Right? Today, we run businesses mostly based on structured data, which is in our ERP. So we presume that we know our consumer and what they would want and what future products we would want, innovate products or services based on the structured data we have. So here, when you talk of SMAC, I think a lot of us are missing that point in terms of today, how you define consumer. You define a consumer or a customer saying that a guy who has transacted with you in the past. Into the future, it's not going to be the case. In the future, what we are saying is today, Facebook acquired WhatsApp at $170 million or whatever. Why? Because that creates an ecosystem of reach. So today, SMAC has a potential of creating a bigger ecosystem beyond the shores of Sri Lanka. So if we, I don't know, as per Treasury Secretary, our goal by 2020 is to become 150 billion economy. Today we are at 70 billion. If we are saying we are going to generate another 80 billion size of economy by just focusing on a 22 million population, we are fooling ourselves. So only way we could reach the markets beyond Sri Lanka is going to be SMAC. And then we have to bring relevance in terms of that population, 8 billion population out there versus what we can produce, what services we could consume. Today, if you look at this, just roll back. Today, we know Lay's, you all know this chip company, and Oreo. Now they have a website. You could log in, right? Today you can go and tell Lay's, I want to have this flavor next, right? And there is a program which Tesco runs, get on the shelf. A consumer can on social media say, yeah, I would like to see this product on your shelf tomorrow, right? Today we are giving, SMAC is giving a consumer bigger voice they did not have. And increasingly, economy is shifting from the Western world to the Asian world. And with China and India taking the first and third places, which is going to open up new markets for manufacturing. Today, manufacturing is 16% of the world's GDP, right? That's only going to grow. But it's going to grow with expectation of mass customization. Everyone is going to want a unique product. They don't want just a label, right? So if we want to cater specifics in terms of that, big data is the thing that we're talking about. And I'll probably allude to in the ongoing conversation rather than talking the whole time. I'll park it there.
This, 150 billion economy, that's a dream or whatever. And Rohan, you are going to be an integral part of delivering a $150 billion economy for Sri Lanka. First, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. And in that context, talk in terms of, will the manufacturing technology as we know of be obsolete in the future, and what's evolving across the world?
Well, as you rightly said, I think I should say a few words about my background, because unless my answer would sound very abrupt. So what I'm into is I'm manufacturing the impact sensor for the automobile airbag and the seat belt. And the other day I met a guy, and he in fact wanted to know from me as to what I do. I told him that I'm manufacturing the impact sensor for the airbag. He said, who's your biggest customer? I said, my biggest customer is Toyota. Then he said, oh my God. I said, why? He said, I purchased a Toyota yesterday. So I told him, don't worry. Even if you meet with an accident, your airbag still will be intact. So the uniqueness of the product that I do is its quality requirement. Its quality requirement is called 1 ppm quality. That is 1 part per million is the defect tolerance rate, which we have achieved here in Sri Lanka. So this topic, you know, this very word cloud sends a, you know, tingle down my spine, some kind of fear down my spine, because I heard that Ford has put to the market a new car called EVOS, and that is cloud connected. And most of the vehicles that will be coming in the future will be communicating to each other. And this communication will reduce the vehicle-to-vehicle collisions by 82%. I'm lucky it is not being reduced by 100%, because I will be out of business if that happens so. So this kind of technology is really disrupting the business I'm in already. But what are the actions that I have taken? I have taken some local actions. That is, I have spoken to the people at Slintech, the nanotechnology people, and to come out with a solution to replace the airbag with some new technology before someone else does that.
Good one. Dylan spoke of co-creation, right? Crowdsourcing. I mean, I suppose that's the future. Can you talk a little bit, Channa, in terms of how you can leverage crowdsourcing to co-create?
Yeah, I think before I get into crowdsourcing, the fundamental question is, do we know our consumer? Right? So for example, a friend of mine, a small-time manufacturing guy, consults me on, you know, whatever the technology to adopt. So he was asking about, you know, the safety of supply chain, you know, sharing the information with, you know, suppliers and all that. Then I found the next day, went into his Facebook, he has his kids' photograph up on Facebook. So I was asking him, you know, is your kid more valuable than your product? Because he has no question of putting the kids with all these, whatever that's going on with kidnappings and so on the Facebook. So what it means is, as a consumer, we don't know his behavior. So how do you actually capture this erratic behavior, digital behavior of a consumer? So one way from a manufacturing perspective is actually getting your product more consumer-centric. So in order to, traditionally we had surveys and so many other things, but that is becoming ineffective because of the speed, lack of speed or lack of response, right? So I think from a co-creation perspective, you spoke about, getting some consumers involved, but I think it's the whole value chain of starting from concept, design, manufacturing, and also product testing. So unfortunately, in your case, we still have not figured out a way to consume Munchie biscuits digitally, right? I don't know whether there will be a time that happens, but for most other products, like for example, I know some of my friends in the audience, you can wear there's technology available where you can wear a clothes and try out before actually buying that, right? So the technology is available, but I think the key thing is, can you get the consumer involved in the entire chain? Because automating supply chain is a no-brainer, because obviously it will give you cost benefits, unit cost coming down, but you will have the best supply chain in place, but if nobody buys your product, end of the day, the whole supply chain is useless. So that is where crowdsourcing comes into effect, where you you get your consumer involved in every step of the way of before it actually even hits production. The second side is in terms of once you actually look at that, look at in terms of getting the consumer involved, how do you actually take that to the market? Right. Again, once you get a product out, can you get the feedback in fast and the rejects in fast? So it's a whole chain of things that is going to happen. So the digital technologies, SMAC will help us to do that. And more we get consumer involved in the entire chain of things, and the technology is available to do that. So one of the questions actually a friend of mine asked, as a country, I guess MAs and Brandix can afford technology, but can a small timer afford these kind of technologies? So obviously cloud is one option. The second one, actually a more revolutionary framework which is coming out is called Hadoop, where a lot of vendors are adopting this, where it uses low-cost servers or mid-range servers to do parallel processing of data and information, and get that information at a fraction of the cost of the bigger technologies that are available. So I think the technologies are available, and how do we adopt that is a decision to the decision makers in these organizations.
See, Dhiren, alluding to your presentation and exactly what you said, see, one of the core competitive edges organizations like you have is the huge supply chain network you have located across the world, aligned to your customers. Now, with what he's saying, if technology is going to come so cheap and fast and be accessible for everyone and anyone, how are you going to compete in that environment in the future?
See, Imal, I think technology is not the only barrier. The reality is the geopolitics of the world, the competencies, the IP conversations. There will be many other barriers that will still give us competitive advantage. The reality of it is that as much as we thought that the internet will level the world, internet didn't. It actually divided the world a little bit more. So I think the conversation lies in the speed of innovation, in the speed of how you design supply networks, right? In the final analysis, like you said, co-creation talks about IP creation, right? It's about how do you utilize. So I'll take an example. We, in the past, thought design was something that should be held inside an organization, right? But the reality of the matter is that if you look at companies that still hold that view, are getting very marginal payback for their design. There's a company called, I think, Build Your Own Bear, which basically allows children to build and design their own teddy bears. And they charge a heck of a lot after getting kids to do the work.
Thank you. See, I suppose the point Dhiren was talking about was relevant innovation delivered fast, right? How can technology help?
No, I think Dhiren's point is absolutely correct, because if you look at today, I think we are fast moving away from a linear value chain, right? Gone are the times where companies go and do forward integration, backward integration, but stick to the core competency, even in what you're doing. And today, we are creating a value ecosystem, right? Today, if you look at, I'm just saying, if some guy, I know, because digital is tough for a guy who's already been in a traditional business. But if some guy comes up today and tells, hey, I'm good at designing, and I'm going to design my stuff here, and I'm going to manufacture this in China, and source my material from wherever, it's cheap. Today, the point of convergence of mobile gives all those people to collaborate at a unique proposition at a given point in time when a consumption is required. Today, if you look at Nike has moved from a concept store of a virtual wall. So they don't carry zero inventory, right? You go and pick your shoes, you go and pick the color you want, it'll get shipped to you in a week. Right? That's happening today. And why did Nike get into full bands? Because the full band gives Nike more information, big data about how the consumer is behaving. What is he doing? What is he eating? How much time is he exercising? And that goes as input in terms of the product design, improvement. Those days, Nike came with Air Plus, that was innovation, not anymore, right? So that is where technology is helping, because the more data you bring relevance in terms of new product, which is relevant to the consumer, that is where the space is moving to.
So, Dhiren, you have a point, yes?
Yeah, I just want to add, Ramesh, I think he explained it brilliantly. I think the reality is, Imal, just to build on your former question, ability to collaborate will become much better. So in the past, we were competing with closed value chains. Value chains where we have partnerships, long contracts, long running product life cycles were the basis of competition. In the future, this security will disappear. But I don't think I don't think that you need to go out of business. You have to reinvent your core competencies. So manufacturing, we will still have to physically make something, but who I collaborate will be different. Whether I work in a closed loop will be different. Interfaces will become simpler. New business models will come and disappear very quickly. But you can sustain as long as you change.
I mean, Rohan,
I think I have a contradicting point to Ramesh, what you raised, moving to China or India with new technology. I do not do, will never do that or contemplate doing so, for the reason that one thing, fear of being swallowed by the giants. And secondly, now take for example, in India, there is a similar company that does the same product that I do here in Sri Lanka. And that company is, originally, it was called Motherson Sumitomo. It was an amalgamation between a Japanese company and an Indian company. But today, it is Motherson Sumi. Tomo is gone. Now, in a few years, you will find out that only Motherson remains. So I do not want the same thing to happen to me. And also, I believe in the local talent. And whatever the technology that is there, it does not necessarily mean that you have to move out and do your production elsewhere, because still there is a conducive environment in this country to this kind of manufacturing.
That's true, but listen, you have the consumers or the users of the motor vehicles, then you have the manufacturers or the brand owners to whom you supply. So you're about 2 levels removed. Now, if I was a manufacturer, one of the things I would look at is, simplifying my process, and that would mean re-looking at sourcing as it used to be historically. You fit into my current supply chain network. I might not want to there in the future. How would you address a challenge like that? Currently, so you have an outsourced supplier of airbags and brake safety. Perhaps Toyota is looking at saying, how can we get rid of that process, to simplify it? Is that, how would you look at a challenge like that?
Well, in my business, there is a big entry barrier because of the quality that is required. So therefore, that is why now, even the companies, Japanese companies that came to India and China, the automobile makers established in those countries, they are buying these components from me. Japanese manufacturers in India, they are not buying it from Motherson Sumitomo. They are buying it from Lanka Harness. So there is an entry barrier because of the quality. As I told you, it is 1 ppm, 1 part per million. So we have to have a foolproof system in our processes. And talking about the processes, now quite contrary to the popular belief, 50% of the product is labor intensive. And in a product that is 50% labor intensive, there can always be human error. So when there are recurrent defects owing to human error, then I need to intervene and see whether technology can intervene. And my company is 12 years old, and it has happened over the years. Wherever there has been human error, there has been digital jigs that has been introduced. Then the cameras, those are very primitive when it comes to the technology that we have today. But still, when you look at how I started and the process, when I look at the photographs of the processes, they're completely different today. And even the product timing has increased more than 100%.
Thank you, Rohan. Indika and Chan, I want both of you to respond. Indika first and then Chan.
Yeah, I think outsourcing is one of the strategies we are using to optimize our cost or a profit. But in the outsourcing, there are 2 theories. First thing, you have to think about whether you have knowledge. The other one is whether you have capacity. If you don't have knowledge and if you don't have capacity, you are in a wrong business. If you have a capacity and knowledge, then you can decide whether you want to outsource it or not, based on how this part is important to your architecture. If you look at the Toyota engines, they are 100% manufacturing in-house. Transmission system, 70% outsourced. Stereo system, 100% outsourced. This is how they classify it, whether we are outsourcing this or not.
So Channa, from a technology perspective, what can technology offer?
Yeah, I think we are also forgetting a fundamental point I think Dylan raised in his presentation about people, right? Where people are the most important in addition to the machines and the processors and whatever we have. And when you look at people, what is the first thing that you do when you want to hire a new person today? Go to LinkedIn and look at the profile of the person, right? And that is smack, right? So, I mean, do we actually do that? Do we actually monitor? Okay, we have all these HRIS, HRM systems in place, you know, do 360-degree evaluation and all these things, right? But do we actually observe what the people are doing digitally in their lives, day to day? And what is the next step that they are going into? Probably it's already available digitally, you know, either LinkedIn or something, right? But I don't think we are actually in a place where we are capturing that part of our HR system. Because if as you said, we have talent, but if you lose that talent, then you know the talent goes away to somebody else, and you lose the competitive advantage, right? And might as well move to China or India for lower cost. But what do we do from a technology perspective to capture this? I think that has to be an essential part of our HR process, because nowadays the people, you know, going through agencies and finding it's still there, but I think it's getting blurred. So we need to start looking at technology. How do we retain our good people?
I think, Channa, you brought a good point, all to do with people. I think there are two people here I would like to actually ask the question about people. Because you can bring technology, you can invest in capital, all of it is fine. But ultimately, there are some tasks that can only be done by people. So Dylan, first over to you, and Rohan, next to you.
I think, Imal, if I can also start with your previous question, I think on the outsourcing thing, which I think is a brilliant question, because a lot of us get confused when to use outsourcing. If one has to use outsourcing for their core process, I hate to say this, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but I think that means we've fallen asleep at the wheel, right? Core competencies aren't redundant. We need to remodel them. We need to make them consumer relevant, but core competencies aren't relevant. So if you can tell me that somebody next door can do your job better than you, then you are already out of business. So I think we need to understand how do we remodel ourselves. Kimberly-Clark sold the paper mills and went into paper products. IBM sold their laptop division. Sony just sold their laptop division. So there can be strategic decisions in business modeling where you can decide. So I think that's a very important question, Imal, that you raised. And I think you need to understand how you're changing your business model before you take on something like outsourcing. But as for people, we are in manufacturing, and every day we are amazed, Imal, because of the reality of it is, if you take my plants, I mean, one of the biggest plants is, you know, obviously Borderland, which has about 6,000 people. The two of the best quality managers started as operators on the first day, first 10 operators. They have their MBAs today, they've come up through the succession plan, right? And the opportunity here is, you know, somebody taught me very early in life that at the end of the day, the aspirations of most people are so common. The opportunities that are dealt to them are different. Technology, as he just intimated, allows us to level the playing field better. As a CEO, what do I want? I want the best man on the job, because that means I've got less work to do. So I want to make sure that I create the right skills, I create the right level of transparency, I create the right meritocracy, I create the right ladder up my organization that people are fighting to lead, fighting to work in the teams to produce. And I want to create transparency so that the right person fits in the right slot, and I'm going home at 5 o'clock, and I still can't go home at 5 o'clock.
I think just want to touch on that. A lot of us think that our businesses are 8 to 5, right? So the moment you get on to smack, whether you like it or not, your business 24/7, right? Dylan can't go home at 5. Even if he does, his business have to be awake. Second point, I think one of the questions which came is that smack is it a barrier in terms of one-on-one relationship? It's not. Because it gives you more opportunity to build one-on-one relationship, provided you have the bandwidth, provided you stay awake 24/7, right? Because you cannot have a traditional business and do bolt-on smack and expect transformation. I think that's the biggest myth that I have seen. A lot of the corporates, if you ask about what are you doing with digital, they say, hey, I have a Facebook page, I have 25,000 fans, and I got a mobile website. You know, now these are bolt-on stuff which will not work because it doesn't impact your end-to-end value chain. Now, and again, one thing I want to allude to is, what are you selling? Now today, Boeing sells engines to Airbuses and things. What do they sell? They sell flying hours. They don't sell engines anymore. Tesla is today making a car. they're going to sell miles, not a car. Because they have enough sensory in those engines and in the cars to be able to give them information to better the product and serve the customer better. And their vision in terms of what they sell is changing. So today, my question really would be, are we selling clothes or comfort? How could we transform this whole thing from a capex to opex, where the guy would sign up for a month, hey, I want clothes for a month. Tell me what you can give me. Why just a piece of shirt or a tie? Right? So that is where the business model disruption happens in terms of your vision itself. So SMAC cannot impact your business until if your vision stays stagnant. Then you become constipated, like what Peter says.
Sorry, you want to?
Yeah, I want to add a little bit of things to this discussion, because here they mention whether the SMAC can eliminate one-to-one discussion. Yeah, the question. But I think this will support to have a fruitful discussion, because if you look at the analytical side, it's giving more data, more tools to analyze the situations, but you need people to take decisions. Once you have the right analytical tool and the sequence of events, then we can have a one-to-one discussion and arrive for a optimal solution. Because at the moment we are using data with the shop floor data who are manually calculated. By doing this, we will not get the optimal solution. But once we move into analytics, you can have a better tools, you can have a better analytical skills. Therefore, after having one-to-one discussion, you can arrive for a very good manufacturing solutions.
Yeah, I think, again, I want to actually go back to that question of are we getting closer to consumers, customers or not? I mean, it's not, unfortunately, it's not from the manufacturing, but from a banking example, you know, all of us get bombarded with you getting 2-3 calls a day. Do you want a new credit card? When I already have 2 credit cards from the same bank, right? And you are so annoyed that they don't know you, right? So what? And actually, I approached that bank. You know, I don't want to name the bank, and asked the CMO, you know, why is this happening? You don't even know that I have 2 credit cards, and 10 different guys are calling me. You want another credit card from the same bank, right? So the answer was that, you know, we don't have scale in this country. We don't have enough customers to justify a CRM or, you know, some sort of a customer-centric application. But then obviously with cloud and SMAC in place, I mean, it becomes more cost-effective of, you know, getting to the right, I mean, without actual investments in capital, you know, as Ramesh said, the OPEX model. So it's more about actually getting more close to the consumer. I mean, that's end of the day that what technology is providing, because we cannot scale without technology to reach to each and every consumer. And technology will help us to do that. So that's where we need to use technology.
See, we are now, as I said, it's a T20. We got 10 balls to go, 2 balls to each of you, right? That's it. Closing comments from each one of you. I'll start with Rohan. Quick note so that you can tell something the audience can remember.
Well, this technology, SMAC, will certainly make products from generic to specific. There is one Dr. Nicholas I met a few days ago. In fact, he's staying at this hotel. And he told me that the drugs in the future will be individual specific. Today, what the drugs that we have are general drugs. But the problem in creating specific drugs for an individual is you need to have a DNA profile. And today, DNA profile will cost you around $10,000. So no person would dare go and do a DNA profile to get his medicine. But there has been a professor in London where he has made a system where you can do your DNA profile for $100. So that IP has been sold for 600 million euros. So this kind of specific, customer-specific technology is going to replace from general to specific. Having said all that, I have to emphasize the importance of the individual and the individual strength and the individual thought. You take, for example, an egg. If it is pressurized from the outside and it breaks, life ends. But if it is pressurized from the inside and it breaks, life begins. So all great things happen from within the individual. So we have in our organizations, more than technology, we have to believe in the strength of the individual.
Yeah, I think the question was, do we need to adopt SMAC? Simple answer is we don't have a choice. Because people are talking about not just BYOD, bring your own device, but more now, bring your own app. So when that actually happens, right? I mean, without technologies which are like the SMAC stack, I don't think there is any way for a country like ours to afford such huge investments in technology. When somebody has already invested in that, in the cloud. So best way is to figure out, as you were taking the Kodak example, the business models are going out, faster than you think. The only way to, be in this game and succeed is to make sure that you are more close to the consumer and ensure that you use technology to do that and at a cost-effective way so that you can afford it. Because without that, I don't think any single organization in this era will survive.
Thank you, Indika. Closing thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think most of the people believe this Mac is a new technology and that will give a competitive edge today. But if you look at tomorrow, without this, you can't survive. That has been the practice. Therefore, without any delay, I think everybody has to adapt to this new technology and get the benefits.
My 2 cents would be like Sri Lanka professes the 5+1 hub concept in taking Sri Lanka forward. In 80s, we were cribbing that Singapore stole a Colombo plan and became at least a 65,000 per capita income country today when we are struggling at 3,600. So if you are saying we want to beat Singapore, the only way is digital, because that will only open the markets for us, open the ecosystem for us, and we have to find a way to co-create using digital as a platform. We don't have an option in that.
So I think the reality of the conversation is that we are all convinced that SMAC will disrupt, and it will certainly disrupt consumer behavior. So that's a given. We get that. I'll take an example from Henry Ford, because I think at that point, he paid the highest wages in the industry. And his view was that his employees were also his customers, and that they needed a good standard of living so that they could consume his products. And I think SMAC is a bit like that. Remember that your customers are also your employees. They can give you the ideas. They are changing. They can help you change. They can help you give the ideas of how to consume it and help you change incrementally. So the last statement is they are to reimagine your business and move incrementally. There's nothing wrong with incrementalism, but continue to move. And I think your businesses will evolve and continue to win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohan. Thank you very much, Indika, Channa, and Ramesh, and especially you, Dylan, for a great presentation. And thank you very much for all of you for allowing us to have this conversation just at the brink of lunch. So thank you very much for being here, and have a great day as we go on.
So you know that when I was a kid, my dream was to become a rock star. Unfortunately, I went for school, choir audition, and then the master in charge after my performance said, Lakshan Bandaranaike, please go to the next room. That is where we teach public speaking. So that ended my career. But today I'm going to perform for you before lunch for your entertainment. I'm kidding. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful inventor and this great manufacturer who put Sri Lanka on the world map. And he's also a great performer. Please welcome Rohan Palewata. Can I join you?
විතක් මදු පෙරාගෙනල්ලා සුරන් රවටලා ඇසක් ඉඟි මරා රැඟුම්පා මුවට යා කළා විතක් මදු පෙරාගෙනල්ලා සුරන් රවටලා ඇසක් ඉඟි මරා රැඟුම්පා මුවට යා කළා ඇඟුම් තෙරපිලා දුන් අසුන් මුස වෙලා සීන ලොවක පාවේ සඳුන් සීල යාවී සනසා නලවා සුරංගනාවක් හෙමින් ඇවිල්ලා අදේලක අයදී සුරංගනාවක් හෙමින් ඇවිල්ලා අදේලක අයදී රැයක් නිදි මරා සරාගී ලවන් වෙහෙසිලා යලිත් නෙන තුරා සුරංගී නිදිමි මග බලා රැයක් නිදි මරා සරාගී ලවන් වෙහෙසිලා යලිත් නෙන තුරා සුරංගී නිදිමි මග බලා එතත් සඳ උදාවේ රැයක් පැමිණිලා සීන ලොවට යාවේ සුරබ මා සොයාවී සනසා නලවා සුරංගනාවක් හෙමින් ඇවිල්ලා අදේලකුම් අයදී සුරංගනාවක් හෙමින් ඇවිල්ලා අදේලකුම් අයදී සුරංගනාවක් හෙමින් ඇවිල්ලා අදේලකුම් අයදී. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to please put your hands together and thank our panel speakers. Now it's 1:15. We will be 1:12. We'll be back at 2 o'clock for session 4. Enjoy your lunch. It's at 8 p.m. Thanks so much.